Hey guys, thanks for joining us on this special episode, and don't forget to support our Patreon. Just $1 or more will get you early access to all of our content as well as other special features. Enjoy the show! The following is a fan-based video review under fair use. Zorro is owned by Mondial Televisioni, Titanus Entertainment, Alain Delon, along with the Duccio Tesori and Johnston McCully estates, and Zorro Productions. Please support the official release. The hell? Please use caution when opening this door. Gee, I hope this doesn't lead to any wacky antics that'll segue into the next review. Ah, fuck it, I'm a gambler. Jehovah's Witness! Jesus! Greetings, senor. I've noticed your skills with the sword have improved since our last meeting. You are progressing that much closer to your adversaries. I want to see your talents upon our next encounter, my friend. Kindest regards. Zorro. Man, that guy can ride, huh? You know what? What the hell? Let's talk about another movie with this guy. Senors and senoritas, it's BigJackFilms here, and welcome back to another review. Once again, let's talk about the mass-foxed Avenger of California, shall we? For those who don't know, I am a huge fan of the masked caballero of Los Angeles, Zorro. Created over 100 years ago by Johnston McCully, Zorro has had over a century on the big screen, especially given he was the first action-packed hero in the 1920 film The Mark of Zorro starring Douglas Fairbanks. And while there hasn't been a proper Zorro movie since 2005... for a few reasons, there are plenty of Zorro movies to choose from all over the cinematic spectrum, from the silent era, the golden age, television, and action-packed 90s movies. Hell, there was even an anime called Kaiketsu Zorro, which is fucking awesome! However, some adaptations have been forgotten about since they were made in a certain period of time. And that, of course, being the 1950s to the 1970s, with the exploitation genre simply known as the spaghetti westerns. At the time, Hollywood pictures in the Wild Wild West were more patriotic and full of heroism, with stars like John Wayne and Steve McQueen. But spaghetti westerns were much cheaper, shot overseas in Italy or France, and used non-union actors and nobodies poorly dubbed for American releases. Back then, they were frowned upon for their use of violence and making the American cowboy much more of an anti-hero and grittier compared to the patriotic tone of the golden westerns. But eventually, especially today, the subgenre is celebrated by film fans and Hollywood alike for such classics as Django and The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, with stars such as Clint Eastwood and Van Cleef.
But in the mid-70s, there was one spaghetti western that has since been lost to time in the mountain pile of films of that genre. But in my opinion is my personal favorite adaptation of Johnston McCully's work. That, of course, being the 1975 classic starring French actor Alain Delon in the Italian-French production of Zorro.
On the eve of his return to Spain from the New World, Don Diego de la Vega, played by Alain Delon, meets his old friend Miguel de la Sada, played by Mario Mezze, who is about to take up the governorship in Nueva Aragona. On the evening of his departure, Miguel is assassinated by the sinister military commander of Nueva Aragona. Diego vows to avenge Miguel by taking his place, but not before a dying Miguel makes Diego swear the new governor will never kill. As we see Nueva Aragon in a state of oppression and dictatorship, we meet our villain of the piece, Colonel Huerta, played by Stanley Baker, until Diego appears disguised as De La Sana. While luring Colonel Huerta's fears by pretending to be a useless flop, Diego learns that Huerta is a cruel despot as well as a dangerous swordsman, and guarded by the bumbling Sergeant Garcia, played by Italian comedian Mustache. With the help of our Bernardo of the movie, Joaquin, played by Enzo Celestico, Miguel's devoted mute servant, and aided by Assassin, the governor's Great Dane, Diego dons the mask of Zorro to fight for justice and rebel against the evil Colonel Huerta with the help of his allies and friends, such as Father Francisco, played by Piero Albertini, and his love interest Hortensa Polito, played by the beautiful Ottavia Piccolo. So while the plot seems like a simple tale of swashbuckling adventures, why is the 1975 Zorro my favorite adaptation of The Masked Hero? Well, it all stems at a very young age. When The Mask of Zorro was released in the summer of 1998, I did a lot of research due to my fascination with the character, watching every movie I could get my hands on VHS. My first sight of the film was in a 1998 documentary called The Many Faces of Zorro, with poor quality clips of the film itself, which we'll talk about the quality controls of the film later on. But the exciting images piqued my interest even further. And it took me 6 years to find a damn copy. Seriously, this movie for a while was a fucking nightmare to obtain, but I finally got around to watching it circa 2004 and have enjoyed the movie on repeated viewings ever since. And for a classic story told for a genre at the time that wasn't well received, it actually mixes the two together quite well. Despite its somewhat dark moments, it is very much a family-friendly spaghetti western movie, but has great locations and camera work, fun action scenes, and a great variety of characters with some of their best incarnations to date. The first, of course, being the original Zorro and his true identity of Don Diego de la Vega. In this film, it's clear that he's in some aspects already been the masked hero in previous adventures, and only after encountering the events with one of his allied friends with the governor, decides to take essentially a detour quest in this movie to defend another land from tyranny. Though some aspects, like Sergeant Garcia, who was established in the original stories and previous films since 1920 in California, siding with another military commander in another country doesn't make too much sense. But I digress and ignore little aspects like that. Back to Zorro, in this film, he's not only a great master of disguise as the imposter governor, but as Zorro, Alain Delon gives us the perfect balance of the character, from the humor, charm, heroism, acrobatics, sword fighting, and can even be surprisingly intimidating, which not many actors can balance all at the same time. For me, he's the character's equivalent of Kevin Conroy's or Christian Bale's Batman, mixed with the grit and attitude of Clint Eastwood in the Dollars trilogy. It's no wonder why he was a huge heartthrob back in the 1970s for Italian and French film gals at the time.
You've given me another reason to live and fight. That's help enough.
Delon took on the role in tribute to his young son as a birthday present, probably because his son was a fan of The Masked Hero and maybe even watched the Disney series, which really sparked a new generation of fans at the time. And honestly, for Delon, that adds so much more charm and likeness to his performance. Another nod to Batman, it's much like why Ben Affleck took on the mantle of the Dark Knight for his kids as well. So to any dads out there in Hollywood looking for work, wanting to gift their kids to play their favorite superhero, take these guys as an example. It honestly honestly makes their roles so much more emotional and charming on screen that there's real motivation to their performances. Funny to think that Alain Delon's role of Zorro was so good that years later Sony offered him the role again in The Mask of Zorro, but it's unknown why he declined at the time. It would have actually been cool to see and make this film canon to the most current incarnation, but no hero is without its villain, and Stanley Baker as the evil Colonel Huerta is a venomous bastard. From the very beginning when the assassins give his name, it just rings bad news.
Who sent you?
Huerta. Coronel Huerta.
I want to know why. Why? Why?
No governor must reach Nuevo Aragon.
And once introduced, you can see he's already an intimidating threat strategically, with scheme after scheme in enslaving the people and his many cold-hearted attempts just to capture Zorro, to become a tyrant of the land.
I'm here for one purpose and one purpose only. To capture Zorro. And to see him hanged.
Not to mention a great exchange in eye-to-eye when Diego witnesses the Colonel's skills with a blade, which Zorro really has his work cut out for him. Literally.
One is not even sport.
Stanley Baker is fantastic in this role, and the look on his face in every scene shows that he was having way too much fun playing such a classy and dastardly bad guy. A lot of people confuse him with Burt Reynolds in this movie given the mustache, but it's all part of the character Baker plays. The classic mustache-twirling villain. It's just freaking awesome.
The keys to the governor's room, give them to me.
Impossible. Without orders from His Excellence, nobody gets the keys.
If you don't give me the keys, I kill you. I'll give you the keys.
In fact, this was actually one of his last roles. He sadly passed away in 1977, less than 2 years after the movie's release, which is a shame since he had quite the resume as a popular character actor. But you gotta give the guy his dues, and this is easily his best performance, and my personal favorite of his. Classic antagonist in its finest form.
I'm moved by your faith in me, Your Excellency.
But aside from the two rivals, there's also a lot of fun supporting characters. The first being the lovely Hortensio Polito, who is honestly one of the best female characters in Zorro's history. Unlike most love interests who are essentially damsels in distress, aside from Catherine Zeta-Jones, who's still my favorite, Octavia brings a much-needed sense of rebellion to the role and reminds me a lot of Maid Marian in The Adventures of Robin Hood. She's very much of the high-class royals, but uses her power to fight against tyranny upon the lens of Nueva Aragona. Not to mention, in some aspects, while she does fall for Zorro's attractive mystery, she seems to keep her distance in balancing each other's advances. The scene between the two in the garden of her hacienda is honestly one of the highlights of the movie, providing some great chemistry and dialogue between the two.
I must say, this is the first time I've seen an aristocrat take sides with a bandit.
It's a long, sad story.
You seem to forget that I'm here to bring back justice into this province, and maybe the joy into your eyes.
It's a great scene that allows these two characters to show them on equal terms, and it's also pretty straight on the nose and to the point. Later on, Hortensia seems to be falling for Zorro, but what makes it so funny is how disinterested Zorro is in her advantages. And when she finally confesses her love to him, it takes him totally by surprise, especially since in his other disguise as the governor, he's pretty much playing her cousin.
What do you think you're doing?
I'm coming with you.
You're mad.
Yes, about you.
What?
I love you.
Well, Santa Maria, this is awkward.
What?
And yeah, while later on she does become a damsel in some capacity, she still stays resistant to the Colonel's obsession with her. And Olivia did a marvelous job, as well as being a lovely sight on screen. There's also the bumbling Sergeant Garcia, and like I said before, while the continuity in the Zorro tales is off given the character originated in the California setting, this one is the safe but most visually perfected adaptation of the comedic captain of the guard. And Mustache brought a lot of physical humor to the part. He was a popular comedic character actor throughout his career, as well as having quite a musical talent in his native home of France. But he plays one of the best incarnations of Garcia, and his confrontation with Zorro in the square is funny as hell. Again, almost harkening back to the fight with Errol Flynn and Eugene Pallett in The Adventures of Robin Hood.
But it's definitely a huge nod to the original 1920 film with Zorro and Garcia played by Douglas Fairbanks and Noah Beery.
Keep coming, Sergeant. Keep coming. Keep coming.
Then there's the kind Father Francisco, the man of peace and one of Zorro's greatest supporters against the corrupt government. Italian actor Giapiero Albertini did a wonderful job playing the wise man of the cloth, and stands on par with Eugene Pallett in the 1940 film. Though in this film, he's much more of a key aspect to Zorro's rules of engagement. Beforehand, when the new governor is assassinated, while Diego made a vow to Miguel to never kill in place of the governor, unfortunately, and spoilers ahead, when the colonel kills the father in cold blood, Zorro's witness to such a sin frees him of his oath to not kill, leading to the final confrontation. It's honestly really poetic and gives a sense of God loosening his chains of vengeance for the people to finally fight back.
To be honest, it kinda acts as a predecessor to this classic line from The Legend of Zorro.
So the devil will know. Thank you.
That film is so goddamn conflicting for me!
So props to the character and the actor for bringing a much-needed sense of honor to the movie. And like I said, there are so many other characters that are in this movie that have their chance to shine. From Diego's disguise with his foppish aunt, her love interest and combat-driven Capitan, to Diego's mutant servant Joaquin, the peasant child Chico, and even Zorro's bite out of crime with Assassin the dog, who reminds me of Bat Hound for some reason. All of these characters have moments to show their part in the story, and get a lot of laughs and smiles out of me watching their strengths and weaknesses. Aside from the film being motivated by Alain Delon gifting his son in the title role, it was also made after his experience making the 1964 swashbuckler, The Black Tulip, based on the novel by Alexandre Dumas of Three Musketeers fame. The film was shot in the summer of 1974 on location in Spain and in the studios in Rome and Italy under the direction of Duccio Tessari, who prior making a ton of Italian-French films, actually was a co-writer on Sergio Leone's first installment of his Dollars trilogy with Fistful of Dollars. This film, of course, following the tone of the spaghetti westerns of the time, which were dominating Italy and France film productions in the 60s and 70s, no doubt thanks to the Leone films starring Clint Eastwood, as well as other films like the Django series, which seem to have some upcoming staying power with The Masked Hero, as Quentin Tarantino is planning to make a sequel to Django Unchained based on the crossover graphic novel with Zorro, in which Sony is rumored to be offering one last ride with Antonio Banderas in the role, but that can be discussed in more depth later.
These people are screaming for another Zorro, literally.
I know, I heard them. But, you know, if I do another Zorro, I would be the character that Anthony Hopkins played in the first one.
There you go.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to be 60 next year, so I don't know. When you play Zorro and you have to be on horseback all day long and sword fight and stuff like that, it's a little bit harsh.
Though at the time, Zorro's popularity was a little dry in the 60s to the film's release, since the Disney TV series had run its course for quite some time, and very little film adaptations were made of the character in Hollywood. Even the final Saturday afternoon serials at the time were compiled of stock footage from previous serials to cut costs, though the character began making more of an impression in other parts of the world, with a ton of unofficial adaptations of the character. The most popular titles being Zorro and the Three Musketeers, yes, that was a real movie, Zorro vs. Machiste, later released in the US as Samson and the Slave Queen, and the poorly dubbed Three Swords of Zorro, which came on a double-sided disc with the release of the 1975 film. All surprisingly enough, came out in 1963. Hell, there was even a 1974 made-for-TV remake of the Tyrone Power film starring Frank Angela as the hero and Riccardo Montalban as Captain Pasquale. For a low budget and essentially a shot-for-shot remake of the 1940 Tyrone Power film, it's honestly quite impressive. And given it even uses the same score as the original, it kinda makes me feel like this is the quality that The Legend of King Kong probably would have had in 1975 by Universal. But as far as these spaghetti westerns began to gain more interest in the 60s and 70s, studios were starving for content to repackage these films to English-speaking audiences and grabbed as much as they could to distribute. So the 75 film came out at the right time as this genre was in its final act. And out of all the spaghetti westerns based on The Masked Man, had the highest budget behind it for the time, and it really shows, despite most of this genre of filmmaking is very guerrilla-based and made on practically nothing. The film has great cinematography by Giuliano Albanico, who beautifully captured the film's locations in Spain, with the lands of Madrid being where the majority of the film was shot, which in Zorro lore is where Diego is most known to have studied from before returning to Spanish California to fight against the tyrannical army. All of the locations from the Plaza del Fistas, where the town squares eventually took place, to the Castillo de Venolidas for the film's climax is wonderfully executed on screen.
Now with that said, we need to talk about that goddamn climax.
Arguably, the film's greatest highlight is the final duel between Zorro and Colonel Huerta, which I've come to label as the greatest sword fight in all of cinema. In fact, this made my #1 on my top 10 movie sword fights review, which all of you should check out, by the way. And there's so much to back up on those claims. The first being its build-up from the beginning of the film with the two characters, their interactions, their notes on each other's strengths and weaknesses, and their many battles of utter wits in both the plots and games, as well as their encounters with words are just so much fun to watch, and add a real sense of tension. For Zorro, this is his greatest opponent, and all the elements are in play. From killing his close friend, the Colonel's skills with a blade are equally matched to his, he tries to steal his girl, enslaving the people, and murdering the priest has pushed the masked hero to his limits, and much like Batman in '89, decides to take the matter personally, even stating his feelings to the Colonel in a pretty chilling speech before they draw swords.
The murder of Brother Francisco releases me from the promise I made to another man of peace, who you butchered. It's easy to kill saints, Colonel! Let's see how you do against a sinner.
Well, for the Colonel, the scummy grin on his face says it all. The challenge he has long waited for, and the pleasure he'll take in this game of death shows such delight in his eyes. And despite the chances of death and defeat, vows to take Zorro with him to the depths of hell. It's honestly admirable and really chilling to view.
I'll have that mask on you, even if I have to chase you to hell for it.
And this fight is spectacular. A mix of classic Hollywood swashbucklers and some great editing and camera angles make this fight a thrill ride. It also is on record as one of the longest in cinema, clocking in at just around 16 minutes without cutting away. To compare, this fight is longer than Anakin vs. Obi-Wan in Revenge of the Sith. It never feels too long or dragged out, and that's due to the tensity of the fight and the well-paced editing by Mario Mora. It also doesn't rely on any final battle-esque music, with only the clash and swings of the swords to create a sense of realism and adding additional suspense to the duel. The filmmaker stated the duel was mostly inspired by the 1952 classic Scaramucci, which, by the way, I do apologize if I am pronouncing these names extremely poorly. And in some shots, it's hard not to make that comparison, especially in the wide shots of the castle interiors, which is another thing the fight has going for it. The locations throughout the castle are used to full effect, showing off the amazing production design and dressings. From the courtyard, the armory, the stairs, the office room, the chapel, and to the exterior tower. Not to mention from the look on their faces, Delon and Baker working their asses off in the choreography. Which, by the way, there's some great traditional sword fighting cliches and symbolistic shots in this scene. I just frickin' love it. Traditionally, in the Zorro tales, there was never a real definitive sword for the character and his dueling rivals. Some see a military saber, a fencing épée, or even a French rapier. The most famous screen-used prop, for which I own a replica of, is more identified as a spadroon from the Antonio Banderas movie. But this film is a little harder to make out. They have the makings of a small sword or a court sword used by 17th century military. However, the handguards are much like a smaller-scale saber rail. It's more than likely that these prop swords were customized with these guardrails and smaller fencing blades for safety when the two actors went at it, which is common practice in stunt work and stage combat. Whichever the case, the final duel and the rest of the adventurous sword fights in the movie are outstanding, and props need to be given to the stuntman involved in what looks like a ton of pretty dangerous attempts. Did anybody else catch that? I'll never get tired of that. The film's soundtrack was provided by the very talented De Angelis brothers, who also go by the band name Oliver Onions. Working on several film and TV productions before and after the film onwards, they add a perfect mix of that spaghetti western charm with the famous Spanish theming Zorro is known for. They not only provide great themes to the score, but also create a catchy 70s jingle for the film with the song Zorro is Back, which was more so meant to advertise the film to debate the return of the classic hero to cinemas. It's very 70s and cheesy as hell, but that's the fun of the whole song.
It's fun to be, it's fun to see, it's so fun to hold it.
But aside from that, the film's score is fantastic to match the picture, with its massive use of acoustic Spanish guitars and flamenco tap dancers. The soundtrack I don't think was ever released at the time on LP records, but in May 2012, the score did get a proper release on CD and digital. But only in limited numbers in Japan, and is really hard to find in physical form. Hell, to even download on Amazon or iTunes is a pain in the ass, with only samples being available on YouTube for the time being. But it's worth checking out, to be honest, however you can. It's a decent score.
Now, as much as I love this film as my favorite adaptation of The Masked Hero, I will admit there are some minor issues here and there.
For one thing, the film is not for everyone, especially if you're not a hardcore spaghetti western fan, which the genre itself is also known negatively for its poor dubbing and sound quality.
So this bandit calls himself Zorro, and he thinks he can apply his own brand of justice just like that, does he?
Who the hell is this?
Not to mention its grimy film grains and quality, which over the years the film upon multiple releases has really suffered immensely. The film's final cut clocks in at about 2 hours total when it was first released in Italy and France in 1975. However, when it came time for later international releases, especially in North America in June 1976, the film was slightly cut down to about 1 hour and 50 minutes.
Hell, the film was a massive success in Japan, creating a ton of publicity buzz, and even getting a comic book adaptation at the time.
But in some aspects, you can see why some areas of the film were cut for international releases. For example, there's a whole side plot regarding Miguel's aunt and the Capitan on a stagecoach in the mountains where they're attacked by the Ku Klux Klan? What the fuck? Though it does build up their chemistry and love for one another, the scene is just so bizarre and weird for a Zorro movie.
He probably wears the mask to hide his bald head and unsightly features.
The movie also ends very abruptly, even with the Colonel's fall intact, and that's mostly due to the fact that in later releases they cut the final speech from Otencio Polito, which to this day I have yet to find an English dub of. So I can't even tell what the hell she's saying.
But even then that was a problem come the multiple home video releases on VHS, DVD, and even Blu-ray to an extent. As the film eventually faded into obscurity and even escaping into the public domain, it was cut to an even worse extent to 1 hour and 40 minutes, leaving 20 minutes of the original version lost to time for years. When I first saw scenes of the film in the Many Faces documentary on VHS growing up, I clearly remember seeing the Colonel's fall from the castle tower. However, finally seeing the film on the double disc set, the majority of deaths and violent scenes, including Father Francisco getting shot, were completely cut from the print, and for years it really bugged me. The advent of the internet also didn't help, with multiple confusing sources on where to find the complete uncut version. I also remember in late 1998, when the Mask of Zorro's popularity in full swing, music and video stores selling reissues of the previous incarnations, and a 2-tape VHS copy of the film being sold. To this day, I kind of figured that was the uncut version, given most VHS releases are on a single tape.
But that could also be a case of false information, given the fact that the 75 film was mostly featured as a double feature with the 3 Swords of Zorro, even before getting the double disc DVD, which, by the way, I hate these double discs, because then you gotta pick which side you want to use to have the least scratches.
However, the many prints I've seen online and for free on YouTube, mind you, given the public domain loophole, clock in on the complete film, but only in foreign languages, making the English version even harder to find uncut. But when it comes to the advent of Blu-ray, the complete uncut version was released in English and its multiple languages in 2012. So I'd say definitely grab it while you can. Cristo, you Palo de Santo!
Well, that's gonna leave a Z mark on your wallet. But aside from the high price of physical media and the ridiculous cuts made, you can still find this film in some capacities, and I consider it a hidden gem of the spaghetti western genre.
Overall, the 1975 adaptation of Zorro is my personal favorite of the masked hero's legacy. As much as I love the Banderas film, Douglas Fairbanks, Tyrone Power, and Guy Williams among others, there's just something about this version that draws me in the most. Maybe it's the simple story and adventures, perhaps it's the music, the final duel, and maybe even Alain Delon in the lead himself. But it's left a massive impact on me as a Zorro film that I always enjoy watching when I can, or with friends who have never seen it for shits and giggles. It's a movie to the general audience's mind as a schlock piece, and even some hardcore Zorro fans aren't aware of its existence since its release in 1975. But it's one of the best in the Fox's 100 years of history, coming in at a permanent mark of a 10 out of 10. If you haven't seen it before, I hope my review has gotten your curiosity to check it out, because much like the character himself in the current world of cinema, as comic book superheroes are still dominant in the box office, it definitely needs its time to ride again.
So yeah, folks, I've been wanting to talk about this film for quite some time and bring it to your attention. So if you've seen this movie or had any interest after this review, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below on the Italian-French version of Zorro. So until the next video, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys later. This is BigJackFilms, signing... What the hell? What's going on here?
Greetings, Mr. BigJackFilms. How are you this fine evening?
No, I think the biggest question is, who the hell are you? But overall, I'm doing perfectly fine.
I find that very hard to believe given your track record. I am Dr. Richard Von Stone, Assistant Psychiatrist at the head of the Department of Meta-Human Control.
Department for Meta-Human Control? You're the guys after Dr. Terawat, aren't you?
Your mindset is good. You remember. The doctor will be dealt with accordingly when found. But it is you we have finally tracked down, Mr. BigJackFilms. Our department has great interest in your technology within your household.
Yeah, I don't know what kind of German sausage you're smoking there, buddy, but, I pay my taxes like everybody else. I think you've got the wrong person. What the hell? Come on!
Your firewall took some time to break down, but the codes were easily traceable when you crossed paths with one Meteor Hunter.
Oh, god damn it.
The department has authorized you to be placed under house arrest and on supervision for the time being.
What?
Therefore, you will also cease activities regarding Project FTT, which will be handed over to the department's control for studying.
You can't be serious! You don't even have the rights or consents to that technology! I have the contracts, buddy!
Very well, you will also be held in contempt of government treason if these orders are not met. We will be checking in for more updates as we work more closely together. End of line.
Oh no.
All systems shutting down. Meltdown initiated.
No, 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 no! 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 No!